Okay.
Carl, good morning.
Good morning. I have my
I
I have my orange juice today. So
got
it's
your
not quite
orange
coffee,
juice.
but it's orange juice. It's my
It's
version of
orange juice. So
coffee.
now you're in Georgia. It should be like peach juice or something, but I don't know how you get peach juice, so that's okay.
Sure.
Well, Carl,
Exactly.
we were hoping that in this second installment of Coffee with Carl, you could talk about your family, your upbringing, and how that figures into who you are today and the work you do. Everybody else, feel free to type questions into the chat if you have a question about anything Carl says, because we do have a series of questions I'm going to go through, but there might be a brilliant follow-up question that comes to mind that we're not thinking of. So the first thing, Carl, if you can tell us a little bit about your family growing up.
Yeah. As I think you pointed out at the last coffee session we had, I was born in Key West, Florida. I was born there because my father was in the Navy at the time, and he actually went to Vietnam, and I was born at the Key West Naval Base in Florida. But I grew up in South Dakota, as I've already brought up to all of y'all. And early in my childhood, my mother and father got divorced. It was my mother who basically raised me, my brother, and later on my sister, who was born. And the So in South Dakota, we were obviously it was a one-parent household, and I'll talk a little bit more about my mother here in a second. But my brother right now, my little brother, who is 2 years younger than me, lives in Minneapolis or outside of Minneapolis, Minnesota. He is a team lead for a company that makes industrial louvers. He does that. And my sister is a manager of a hotel in Mitchell, South Dakota. She lives there with her husband, and she has two daughters and two grandkids, which she loves very, very dearly. So that's a little bit about my family. My father currently lives in Arizona. My mother has passed away, but my father lives in Arizona currently. So
So
yes,
you told me that your mom was the most influential person in your life growing up. So tell us about her, please.
absolutely. My mother was a fantastic human being. She was just a great person, a loving, caring, sharing person. As I said, she was a single mother, basically, raising me, my brother, and my sister growing up. And she worked tirelessly. She gave me a real good sense of work ethic. She was always working. I always remember her working. She worked very, very hard, sometimes two jobs at a time, just to help us out, and try and maintain some standard of living for us. But the thing about her, I think I remember the most, though, that was really special about her is that she really enjoyed people. She enjoyed, you know, she I don't know, she just had this way about her that she just liked being around people, and that she liked people and really wanted to connect with them, and really a lot of times saw the good in people even when other people didn't necessarily see that, which I think is something that definitely rubbed off on me, but I think it also really influenced kind of I where I headed and where I turned to in terms of my work and everything like that. But um, for as long as I can remember, I mean, she was, she had a lot of interaction with people in our city and everything like that, and really had an influence on me in terms of people, just seeing people for who they were, the good in them, and the good things that they could do. So.
So, when you start doing this type of work and folks open up to you a little bit, you discover that for many people, the motivation to do this, aside from the, phenomenal salaries that we all make, um, is that many of us have experienced poverty. So tell us about your experience growing up in poverty and how that contributed to your understanding of that experience and other people's lives that is really critical to doing this work.
Yeah, again, back to my mom. As a single mother, it certainly gave me a different perspective on, women for sure, strong women in my life, and understanding how strong women had to be in particular. Um, as a single mother, as I said, she often worked two jobs, and we were still on food stamps and received benefits from the government. That's how poor we were. I remember back in the day getting the government rations, if you will. Things like government cheese and, food stamps and all of those things. We received those, but again, there's no way that we would have been able to make it because she was, again, working two jobs, and we still needed those benefits in order to make it. I remember at the beginning of the month when we would get benefits, and she would have some money, obviously, from her work and everything like that. It was like we were living like kings. And by that, I meant, we would be able to get, some kind of cereal with sugar in it or something, and be able to get soda or things like that. And then at the end of the month, when benefits had run out and we were running low on money, we were eating things like spaghetti all the time, macaroni and cheese a lot, didn't have milk in the house, things like that. So it definitely gave me a real understanding of poverty in our country and kind of where I've come from, and being able to see people in poverty like that. But I'm sure there were many times when she struggled even to pay our bills, even to, figure out, whether she was going to pay a light bill or a telephone bill or any of that. But somehow she managed to keep the lights on. Somehow she managed to keep her telephone, intact, and her housing intact. Although I'm sure there were many times when she was worried about it, and there were many times that she, you know, didn't think we were going to do very well, or didn't think we were going to make it. But I remember also that she never let on that that was the case. That she always tried to make it positive. She tried to always make sure that we had the things that we needed, for school, and the things we needed in terms of clothing and things like that, and even Christmas and holidays, making sure that we at least had, the things that we needed to be able to get by. So it definitely gave me a really different perspective on, on the world around. But if you had asked me when I was a kid, I probably would have told you that we weren't that poor. That, we were just, regular, Americans, I guess, living in America or something. But looking back on it, we were very poor.
Is that partially because your peers or your neighbors or people who lived in the town that you lived in lived comparably, or do you think it was just your mom was really good at keeping
I think
a brave face about it to you, the
I
kids?
think both. I think a little bit of both. I certainly don't think that where we lived there were a whole lot of people who had a lot of means, a lot of money. It was a pretty poor town where we were living, but mostly I think it was my mother really kind of trying to give perspective to it, and helping us realize that as long as we had things that we needed, it was more important than getting the things that we wanted to have all the time.
Wow. So there's actually some really fascinating research done internationally that what matters a lot more psychologically to people and what makes a difference in their lives is not so much how much they have, but how much they have compared to the people around them. And so if
Yeah,
they're, if you have a country that maybe the standard of living is not as high, but there's a less income inequality, it's better than being in a place where there's a huge amount of disparity. So somewhat goes to what you're talking about, but it does also sound like your mom just really did a great job at making sure that adult stuff remained with her. The kids
exactly right.
didn't have
No
to
doubt. Absolutely
share
right.
all of it. Yeah. So now to take it a step further, again, I'm always amazed. The more I get to know people, the more intimately I get to know people doing this type of work, um, you find out that uh, even though we know from research that homelessness in the general population is pretty rare, I mean, it's only natural that folks doing this work, will have a higher prevalence of that because then they're drawn to it and they care about it. And so you also not only experienced poverty, but you experienced homelessness, though. If we're going to get into the niceties of it, it might not be the HUD definition, might be a
That's
slightly
right.
different definition, but that doesn't matter to the person. That matters more to us as I want
Yeah.
to say bureaucrats, but somewhat in that sense. So tell us about that experience and more importantly, because we're not asking this just for lurid reasons. Obviously, we want to know what that experience taught you. So tell us how that happened and what did that experience teach you?
Yeah, absolutely. There were actually two times that I can remember being homeless as a child. The first one, or one of the times I should say, I can't remember the chronology of exactly which one came first or which one came second, but the first one in particular, the first one I remember was living with my grandparents. For some reason, and I don't know how it happened or how it turned out or whatever the case was. But my grandparents lived in a mobile home, a trailer, and I remember for a short period of time, it didn't seem like it was that long, but for a short period of time, my mother, my brother, and myself all had to live with my grandparents in a trailer. And it was obviously it was very crowded. I remember that. And again, I was just a small child. It was very crowded, but again, it was kind of one of those things that just kind of happened along the way. But I remember that distinctly that there was, we all had to kind of cram into one small space and live in the trailer for a little bit of time. The other one was a little bit more impactful to me. And the reason is because my mother had what they referred to back in the day as a nervous breakdown. Um, and she kind of kept that hidden from us in terms of what she actually went through and things like that. But piecing together my memories and remembering some of the things that happened, basically the way that I remember it is she had a nervous breakdown. And because we lived in a small town in a rural community, we did not have a mental health facility there. There was no crisis stabilization unit. There was nothing like that. So the only thing that she could do in order to get any kind of long-term help for her mental health needs was to go to the state hospital, which again, nowadays, it's
All
almost,
right, but the
it's very,
farm,
it's very difficult to get into the state hospital. Um, but back then, it was the only way that she could get any kind of serious mental health services. And mainly from what I can put together, it seemed like it was mainly depression that she was going through. And of course, we were living really a hard life, and she had a lot of pressure on her to really kind of make sure that we were making it and everything. So I can see where she would have a nervous breakdown. Well, when she did that, she went off to the state hospital, which was in another town, hundreds of miles away. She went to the state hospital, and I remember me and my brother at the time, we were really small. We went and lived with our babysitter. She was the person, our babysitter and her family. She was the person who was taking care of us when my mother was working. And all of a sudden, we were just living at their house. And my mom was, in this institution, and she was there. I remember visiting her in the institution. I remember going to see her there. It was very, as you might imagine, it was very institutional-like. Um, she didn't seem like she was much different, maybe a little bit down from who she normally was as an individual, but I remember visiting her there, and we stayed with them for some time, and basically they just took us in as part of their family until she got out of the hospital, and then she came back, and we found another place and went right back to our regular lives. But those are the two times that I can remember that, yes, by HUD's definition, we never would have been declared homeless, but we were definitely without housing at both of those times. But again, and I brought this up at the last coffee conversation we had, is, in our small town, people took people in. You didn't spend time on the streets. You weren't without a house for any significant amount of time. So the community kind of took us in and helped take care of us where they could. So and in terms of the perspective, I mean, it really made me think about all the different types of homelessness. Um, I started in this industry doing street outreach with people who were literally homeless, unsheltered, and had serious mental illnesses. But I definitely have always been able to see that there is a human being there and there's a person there first. And I think this is part of what I've learned through the experience, is that these are human beings going through these circumstances, going through these situations. It doesn't define who they are. It doesn't make up who they are as human beings. It's just situations that they find themselves in, and invariably they'll move through that, and hopefully if we can help them move through that faster, it's all the better for them and help them stabilize. So yeah.
So, wow. I mean, yeah. I mean, definitely, again, without getting too bureaucratic about it, definitely Department of Education probably qualified homelessness.
Yes,
But,
we've been qualified twice
yeah.
under the
So, I
Department
mean,
of Education.
yeah. So
Absolutely.
it's what the layperson would definitely define as experiencing homelessness. So one thing that I noticed during our COVID virtual happy hours is that you and I have something in common. I think alone among our MDHA colleagues, and that is we don't drink. And this, I'm just boring. I don't like the taste, but this seems, in your case, connected to your upbringing too. So why don't you drink, Carl?
That's an interesting story. Yes. So I have obviously drank in my life. I was in the military, so you, as well as you, David. So in the military, you sometimes tend to imbibe.
Mandatory. It's mandatory.
Yeah, almost in some cases. But so I used to drink. But one of the things that I noticed when I was in the military and I was drinking is that many times, if not all the time, every time I would drink, the next day, instead of getting the the what do you call it, normal hangover, I would actually feel better. I would actually feel really good. And on many days when I had been out drinking a lot during the night, and got up the next day, I'd actually go out for a run, or I'd go work out, or I'd go play basketball, or I'd go do something. And so what I realized is that I think there's something in my genetics that, gives me a propensity not to have a hangover and not to have an adverse reaction to the alcohol, the next day. And looking back on it in my family, particularly on my mother's side, my mother's family was pretty much, most of them were pretty much alcoholics. And I think that might have been one of the reasons why my grandfather, in particular, my mother's father, was definitely alcoholic. He used to drive a truck during the day. He would get up very early in the morning. He'd drive a truck during the day. By mid-afternoon, he'd be done with his routes and he'd be done with what he needed to do. And then him and my grandmother would go down to the bar, and they would spend the rest of the day down at the bar drinking. And then the next day, he would get up in the morning and he would do it all over again. From what I could tell, he didn't miss a lot of work. He didn't, it didn't negatively impact his work or anything like that. But pretty much every day they would be down at the bar drinking. The same with my mother's brother, alcoholic as well. Drank a lot of alcohol, and certainly around our family and everything like that, we knew that he drank a lot of alcohol. But I think there's definitely something to that, and that's one of the reasons why now I'm not interested in drinking, because I think it for me personally, I think in my genetics and my family, I think it's probably a slippery slope that I would rather not go down. I don't want to go down that road, and I don't want to end up, being alcoholic like most of my mother's family.
I suppose the interesting thing to I mean point out is that I don't hear in your story that those people ended up homeless. And so again goes back to our lesson that our friend Ian Young will remind us of, that 99%, or whatever, 98%, whatever it is, of alcoholics are totally functioning,
Oh yeah,
and that you don't have to go dry to exit homelessness, and so therefore
that's
we
right.
should not demand of people that they first, get off drugs, get off alcohol, whatever it is,
Yeah,
to receive housing, because most people, I mean, it's sad that, that it's just as sad as if somebody has diabetes or cancer or whatever.
yeah,
It's a sickness. And you know what? We don't throw those people out of their homes. We don't tell
that's right.
people you gotta finish chemo first before you can, get your housing. So, I mean, it
Yeah,
sounds
that's true.
ridiculous to
Well,
even say it. So,
and it's a legal substance. So I mean,
yes,
where I came from, that was not an abnormal thing for people to drink a lot of alcohol, or be at the bar every night or whatever. I mean, it wasn't an abnormal thing, really.
it's part of it that South Dakota is just so damn cold.
Some of it, I'm sure, had to do with that. I think there are some studies that have shown that there might be a tendency towards more drinking in some of the colder states. Yeah, there's
For
definitely
sure.
a lot to do when there's blizzards out and it's 30 or 40 below zero. That's for
So
sure.
move to Jacksonville and then to Dallas. It's a smart thing to
There you
do
go.
if you have that
Exactly.
gene. So you told us about your family growing up. Um, Tell us about your family that you created. You've got a daughter, you've got a son,
Yep.
last but not least, your wife, and kind of,
Yep.
I know your son is back in still back in Florida, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
But you and
Yep.
your wife and your daughter, picked up from Jacksonville and like moved to like Weatherford, which is like crazy. So like what's up with that, you know?
Yeah,
Tell us.
absolutely. Yes. First of all, my son, I have a son who is, let's see, must be about 29 now. And he lives in Tampa, Florida. I went to the University of South Florida in Tampa. Obviously, I lived in Jacksonville. He went to the University of South Florida in Tampa and loved it and decided he was going to stay there. Big into music. He's a big, he likes to create music, make music, edit music, produce music, do all those kinds of things. That's kind of his hobby, his thing that he really enjoys is music. As you said, I lived in Jacksonville since 1990. I met my wife 20 some odd years ago, or 20 and some change years ago, and we've been together ever since. And we have a daughter who is 19. And, oh, she's 18 now. Sorry, my wife is here. She's correcting me on any of the things that I get wrong. She's 18 currently. She'll be 19 on Christmas Eve. So she's almost 19. But we were in Jacksonville, and my wife had always lived in Jacksonville. She had basically grown up there and lived there, and we had been in Jacksonville, Florida for, like I said, since 1990. And one day we just decided as a family that, we wanted to try and move somewhere else, try something new, see what else was out there in the world. And I started looking around for jobs. We definitely wanted to stay in the southern half of the United States because we don't like the cold weather and we didn't want to get into the cold weather. So we wanted to stay somewhere warm. We looked around for job opportunities and found this position. And my wife has a brother and his family who live in Weatherford. And so we thought, well, Dallas is one of the places that we could certainly move to, and we could certainly live. So let's take a look at it. And that's kind of how we decided that. Now we decided it in the middle of my daughter's junior year in high school. And one of the other reasons why we moved to Weatherford was actually because her high school uh, had the credits that she had accumulated in high school wouldn't transfer over to but a few schools in the Dallas and Fort Worth area. And so one of those happened to be Weatherford that would take all of the credits from her high school. And so that was one of the areas that we decided. Now we have since moved to Fort Worth, East Fort Worth, even. We're about as close to Dallas County as you could possibly get um, in Fort Worth. So we're way on the east side of it. We bought a house there. Um, my wife worked at the University of North Florida in Jacksonville for quite a few years there. And now she is doing yoga instruction, actually. She is a certified yoga instructor. She's going through her second certification for yoga instruction. My daughter, during the time of COVID, has just gotten out of high school now. She graduated this last May. And so she's kind of waiting to see what the COVID world is going to bring her before she decides where she's going to go or what she's going to do. We think she'll probably start college maybe in the fall of next year, hopefully once we get past all this COVID and all of that. And she's looking at probably somewhere local here, UT Arlington or UT Dallas or someplace like that, probably. So that's our family. Oh, and our one of our most exciting members of our family is our dog Nikita. I think she's under the bed somewhere here. I was going to bring her out and show her to you. She is a fantastic puppy of ours. Sometimes a little neurotic, but she's a good dog too. So that's my my close knit family here.
Well, we timed this almost perfectly, it looks like. Give us a sneak preview. If you haven't yet, maybe you've not decided what we're talking about next time, but if you have, give us
I
the
do.
sneak preview of next time.
Absolutely. Next time, I'm going to talk about employment, all of the jobs that I've held, the different places that I've worked. As you know, I'm an Army veteran. I'm going to talk a little bit about my Army days, and then talk a little bit about the work that's kind of led me to where I am and some of the experiences and things that I learned at the different jobs that I held. So it's going to be about employment. It's going to be about work.
Exciting. Cool. Well, there were, we planned this perfectly, just in terms of time, but in terms of the questions that interested people, because there's nothing here in the chat. So
Good.
thank you, Carl. This was
Thank
great.
you. Thank you, David. I appreciate it. And thank you all for being here and thank you for watching.
Okay. Bye-bye now.
All right. Bye.